At the police headquarters, the head of the Violent Crime Division Team 1, Dok Jio-song, gathers a group of people. They are seen checking out this criminal called Lee Kong-jin. Lee Kong-jin is the boss of one of the most dangerous gangs of the entire nation, named the Kong-jin faction. Lee Kong-jin started this faction in Seoul at the tender age of 18, and from there onwards in the 2000s, a further 8 new companies were integrated into the Kong-jin faction. Through that, they became the biggest organization in all of Seoul. In that process, though, they went up against the other biggest faction in Seoul. The two bosses of the organizations went against each other in a brutal fist fight. That was 2 years ago. Then we see a clip being played of a recent fight, where we see Lee Kong-jin dragging the living carcass of a man by the hair. This man is said to be the last person of the Pyeontaek division that was destroyed by Lee Kong-jin and his faction. We see people of the group talking about how Lee Kong-jin captured 20 people from that team and whether he is a monster or not for being able to carry it all out with bare hands. Dok Jio-song is angered by this and he aggressively thumps down the glass of drink. He had to get back the attention of his people. Jio-song then goes on to say that they should have really caught Lee Kong-jin, where another officer says that the Kong-jin faction are too violent a force and that catching them will not be easy at all. Jio-song then brings out a picture of Lee Kong-jin and his group standing bare-chested, and he marks the spot that Kong-jin is in before saying that we will soon be hearing more about this man. In another scene, we see the 43-year-old leader of the Kajin faction, Lee Kong-jin, sitting at his chair, listening to the vice leader of the group, Jo Do-young, talk about Busan's Yang Suk-do and his newly found interest in taking over Seoul. He says that Yang Suk-do is meeting up with groups in Jeollado and discussing with them. He also says that they themselves were the ones who pushed those people put from Gangnam, so it only makes sense for them to team up with Yang Suk-do and take them on. Division leader Cha Young-sik adds to this by saying that if all the people from the two regions combine against them, there will be more than 1,000 of them, which outnumbers their entire faction's man count as they only measure up to 600. He says that the winner will be from Kangwon if this were to happen. Jo Do-young says that at this rate, it has gotten harder to get new members to join their faction. However, they really do need more men to add to their numbers. Division leader Ha Sang-jun says that they have already piled up a huge chunk of people who wants to join the Kong-jin faction and that this is the time for them to conduct an interview, because if the opponents decide to attack when they're lacking in manpower, he suddenly stops at that to see everyone around him getting very mad. He apologizes for what he said. Lee Kong-jin then tells everyone except for Jo Do-young to leave the room. We then see Lee Kong-jin walking up the stairs before the scene moves back to when Kong-jin was talking to Do-young. Jo Do-young tells Lee Kong-jin that they are in a desperate need to add new members to the team if they want to neutralize the influence of Yang Suk-do. Lee Kong-jin then reminds Jo Do-young of the day of Taejae's funeral, when they all promised to never put the lives of the faction members in any danger. Flashback to that day, we see Lee Kong-jin asking everyone if they will still follow, to which everyone says that they will till the end of their lives. Back to the conversation, Lee Kong-jin says that now that he has seen Jo Do-young getting married and having kids and living a normal life, he doesn't want it to change. He doesn't want the lives of Do-young, Young-sik and Sang-jun in no further danger. He says that these are the only people he has and considers them family, and that he will end his life to defend them all. Do-young says that he doesn't want Lee Kong-jin to get hurt, and this statement angers Kong-jin, who asks what he just said. Jo Do-young then says that he would get hurt by it too and that he doesn't want that. He says that Lee Kong-jin doesn't really know who his real family is and that he thinks of what will happen to the faction if no one is left, just as much as he thinks of what will happen to his own family if he isn't around anymore. So he pleads to Lee Kong-jin to let him add more members to the faction. Lee Kong-jin, with a very angry face, then says that Jo Do-young should stop being a gangster if he is so scared. Back to the other scene, we see Lee Kong-jin at the top now. As rain pours down, he walks towards the Buddhist monastery. He goes to the temple and bows down to the big statue of Buddha to pray. After praying, he gets up and looks at his hands to find it covered in dark blood. Then we see a group of demons covered in the same black blood approaching Lee Kong-jin. He tells them to wait for a little while as he still needs to help his brothers. This was to signify his inner demons from being in the crime world for a quarter of a century now. We then see Lee Kong-jin sitting on the stairs of the temple as we see two innocent kids run past him because of the rain. Lee Kong-jin then says to himself that if he and Do-young had not joined the gangster side of life and went ahead with a normal one, it would have been better. That's why Kong-jin will do what he needs to do, and won't let any more innocent kid into this side of the world. We then see Lee Kongjin lighting up a cigarette to smoke, and then a monk shows up behind him saying that he realized it was Lee Kongjin the moment he smelled a cigarette. Lee Kongjin is surprised how the monk figured out it was him by just smelling the cigarette. Lee Kongjin then offers the monk a cigarette, which the monk refuses to take, citing he quit. Lee Kongjin then tells the monk to not scold him and ask him how much money he needs to offer. The monk says the same amount of money that he paid for a madman to draw a tattoo on his back. Lee Kongjin then brings out a lot of money to give to the monk, which the monk takes in the blink of an eye and gave Lee Kongjin a rope in return. Lee Kongjin asks what he should do with this rope, and the monk says that he should use this rope to end himself alone, instead of dragging others into this incident. The monk says there are tons of trees and ropes for him to use it with. Lee Kongjin says fine and starts walking away to leave the area. The monk then tells Lee Kongjin that all of his atonement have been for nothing and that they've all been false. Just because Lee Kongjin visits this place and offers money doesn't exactly mean that he can commit any crime and get away with all his sins. Lee Kongjin smirks and says that there is a popular saying in the world, that everything in this life is false. Lee Kongjin leaves some more money on the table for the monk to use later and leaves the scene. The monk says that Lee Kongjin will only know if this life was false or not when it eventually ends. We then see Lee Kongjin walking down the plethora of steps. Midway through, he sees those kids from before sitting on the stairs. The kids are just seen sitting there. They talk to one another saying that they should stop here at the temple until the rain ends. The other kids, however, start walking down hastily. One of them is too hurt to move forward and is struggling a lot. We then see Lee Kongjin walking up to the young boy and asking him to help. The kid asks whether or not Lee Kongjin can to carry him down and also help carry his bags. Lee Kongjin says it's the day where he should help people and that he doesn't mind helping them at all and will carry the boy down until a car arrives. So we see Lee Kongjin carrying the boy with his bags on his back. The kid asks Lee Kongjin if he is too heavy and if that's bothering Lee Kongjin. Lee Kongjin says that it doesn't bother him, but the kid should work out and stay in shape. Kongjin then says that occasionally going hiking with friends is good for health, but they just picked the wrong day to do it. The boy says that it isn't the wrong day. In fact, it's the perfect day, as he brings out his knife. The kid then uses the knife and brutally stabs it inside the neck of Lee Kongjin and then pulls it out viciously as a fountain of blood comes out. The kid is proud and tells his friends that he just finished off Lee Kongjin. However, Lee Kongjin isn't done and he is pissed for what they just tried to do to him. He asks them why they did it. The kids are surprised by it, and the kid who attacked Kongjin says that it all can't be done at once, but just what can an injured and battered Lee Kongjin do against so many guys? Lee Kongjin then asks the kids if Yang Sukdu sent them here to take him out. The kid who attacked says that he knew about Lee Kongjin and what he was up to. They then decide to finish Kongjin off for good. Kongjin warns them, saying that if they leave now, he will forgive them and blame the adults for it. The kids say that there is no way that they will get caught today and that they will finish of Lee Kongjin. Lee Kongjin then squares up and takes off his suit and prepares to fight, saying that the kids must be ready to give their lives for this fight if they really want to take him on. The fight starts with Lee Kongjin delivering a devastating straight punch to one of the kids while another kid rushes in to attack him with a knife. Lee Kongjin takes his arm and throws him away before another kid from behind him tries to attack him with a knife. Lee Kongjin swiftly ducks the knife attack and delivers a thunderous left hook to take out the kid. Another kid also rushes in with a knife and makes slight connection and penetrates Lee Kongjin's midsection with a knife. However, Lee Kongjin uses the lack of distance between the two as an advantage and delivers a rattling headbutt to take him out. Another kid tries to attack him again from his blind spot, but Lee Kongjin grabs his arm, throws it up and uses that opportunity to grab his throat and rail him down the stairs and smash his head into the concrete of the stairs. Lee Kongjin, at his demonic best, tells the kid that he said it before that they'll have to risk their lives to fight with him, but we see the kid starting to cry and asking for help and calls out to his mother. This gets to Lee Kongjin, who lets go of the kid's throat and is saddened by what they forced these kids to do. Just at that moment, two other guys use a rope to wrap around Kongjin's neck and pulls on it. This leaves Kongjin grasping for breath as he is choking, but he uses his unbelievable strength to pull those guys from both sides towards him. They're astonished by the sheer strength the man possesses. However, one of the guys takes opportunity to stab him with a knife through his stomach. This startled Lee Kongjin, and everyone else takes this chance to stab Kongjin one by one from all directions. Kang Jin slowly faints out as one of the kids says, answering the question from Kang Jin before where he asked whether or not the young Sukdu sent them, that it was his uncle's younger brother, Kang Jin faction, who sent them. Lee Kang Jin slowly bleeds out and it looks like he is done for as we see the kids talking about how they've done the job. One of the kids say that they shouldn't have talked about the sender's name, but they don't care as they've done the job already. Then we see a thunderbolt striking and the sky lighting up. Then we see Lee Kang Jin waking up, but in a much younger body. He vows for revenge upon waking up, but then a random boy shows up and tries to talk with Kang Jin, but Kang Jin is in a trance and slowly loses consciousness. Then we see a flashback of what happened earlier. We see a lot of people gathered on top of an abandoned building where two kids are fighting. They're taking their bids on who is winning and who is not. Those two fighting are Lee Mingyu of Seishan High School and his schoolmate, high school third-year student, Lee Kang Jin. They both look spent and at their limit as they've probably fought for a long time. Everyone's saying it is fun to see losers fight each other. The organizer of the fight is looking in disdain. He wants more action as 3 rounds have already passed. Then the organizer asks everyone to cast their bets. Mostly people are betting on Lee Kang Jin because he has the better physique and because he looks less tired and beat up than Lee Mingyu. And that's why the organizer threatens Lee Mingyu by saying that if he doesn't win, the organizer will mess with his mother. This leaves Mingyu in a deep state of uncomfort. They're told to fight, but a teary-eyed Lee Kang Jin refuses to do so and verbally snaps at the organizer. The organizer is very mad at this kind of behavior from Lee Kang Jin. He tries to approach Lee Kang Jin aggressively, but Kang Jin notices this and runs away. He runs till the edge of the building before telling the organizer to watch him as he dives back first from the top of the building to the roof of the car down below. This destroys the car and leaves Kang Jin bloodied and messed up. This whole situation shocks everyone. The organizer asks Lee Mingyu why he didn't hit his friend Lee Kang Jin. Lee Mingyu is mad and asks just why did they have to push him to his limits like this. Everyone wonders what to do now, but the organizer decides to threaten Lee Mingyu by saying that they'll call the police on him for what happened with Lee Kang Jin. Mingyu can't handle it anymore. He breaks down in years and constantly apologizes to his friend Lee Kang Jin. Then we see the similar situation from before as Lee Mingyu rushes down to see Lee Kang Jin's situation, but surprisingly enough, Kang Jin is alive. Kang Jin tries to say things and make moves, but he can't and faints out. The scene changes to the hospital, where we see a broken down Lee Mingyu and Lee Kang Jin's mother sitting in the hallway. Kang Jin's mother asks Lee Mingyu just why did they went to play on top of a building that was under construction. Mingyu doesn't really have an answer to that question. Kang Jin's mother gets a call from work, however, she asks for a bit more time before she can go to work. Lee Mingyu assures Lee Kang Jin's mother saying that she should go to work and that he will be there to take care of Lee Kang Jin. Kang Jin's mother said it's fine and that she has already taken the break and that she is waiting for her son to wake up because he might need his mother when he wakes up. And she tells Mingyu to go home and rest because the incident left a mark on him mentally as well. Mingyu said it's fine and she doesn't need to worry about him as the teacher from school told him it was okay and that he himself won't feel relieved until he sees Lee Kang Jin open his eyes. Lee Kang Jin's mother said it's okay then and tells Mingyu to take care of Kang Jin before she leaves. Soon after, Mingyu goes to take a peek at Kang Jin's room, only to see him awake. Lee Mingyu asks Lee Kang Jin just why he doesn't tell his mother that he woke up, and that he can now behave normally because it's just the two of them. Lee Kang Jin sits up and wonders that after he stopped breathing in that body, he woke up in this one, and according to Lee Mingyu, this body belongs to some high school kid with the exact same name as him. He looks in the window ahead and sees his new body and wonders how someone like him now needs to cope inside a kid's body. Just at that moment, a random patient plays the TV where on the news. We see a report that says the police has ended its nationwide search on a gang that went missing after an accident. It also said that the funeral for the gang will be held besides the temple where there is extra guard. This news baffles Lee Kang Jin, who gets up and grabs his shirt and puts it on. He asks Mingyu if he has any money before he takes the money and goes away, telling Lee Mingyu that he will return it soon. Lee Mingyu tries to chase after him and ask where Lee Kang Jin is heading, but Kang Jin swings a punch at him. Lee Mingyu asks why he is behaving so differently nowadays. Next we see Kang Jin going to the scene in a taxi. He wonders if he is the only one who woke up from his faction. Then he thinks about what the kids who took him out said, that it wasn't Yang Sukdu but Kang Jin faction, a different faction, who tipped them off to attack him. He then says that if that was true, then it won't be Lee Kongjin faction's funeral but the Kongjin faction's funeral, as he will end them all. After arriving there, he vows to get up there and learn for sure on just why he was backstabbed. As he gets up, he finds the monk from before on the stairs who asks why he is here. He asks the monk if he knows what is happening with his life and which ghost is playing with him. The monk says he doesn't know. The monk says Lee Kongjin shouldn't go ahead, as the place is for the unliving, the ones who passed away, but he doesn't listen and goes ahead. He warns Lee Kongjin that he won't survive because there are tons of gangsters up there. Lee Kongjin still wants to go up and see, but the monk tells him that this is the opportunity he prayed for, a chance to live a peaceful life. We then see a flashback where Lee Kongjin prayed in the temple for a normal life in his next coming. Lee Kongjin asks what he can do in this situation. The monk says it's his choice. If he goes up, his life ends. If he goes down, his life continues. A few moments later, we see Lee Kongjin arriving back to the hospital where his mother and Lee Mingyu are waiting. Upon seeing Lee Kongjin, his mother hugs him and cries, and Lee Kongjin says he wants to live first. We see that Lee Kongjin has spent a week in his current body. In a flashback, we see that Lee Kongjin tells his mother that he doesn't remember from the past, probably because he got hit in the head during the fall. The mother is worried about this and suggests they should go to the hospital for this issues. Lee Kongjin refuses to go there and instead suggests that she shouldn't worry and that they can talk later. Lee Kongjin then looks at a pic of his current body when he wasn't the one inside it and wonders what had happened to him. Further on, Lee Kongjin is worried about Lee Mingyu visiting him every day, thinking how he can deal with him. Lee Mingyu has bought meat for Lee Kongjin to eat, but as he is about to offer him to eat it, Lee Kongjin notices that Lee Mingyu has a bruise under his arm. He asks what it is about. Lee Mingyu doesn't answer properly, so Lee Kongjin yoinks him up and takes his t-shirt off to see that his body is covered in huge dark bruises. Lee Mingyu says that this is very embarrassing for him to show, but he says that this is due to the bully from the other day, Jin Man telling him every day to bring Lee Kongjin along. Jin Man says that if Lee Mingyu brings Lee Kongjin along, he will just ask him to keep quiet about the day when the fall occurred and won't take money away from him again. Lee Kongjin assumes that the kid and Lee Mingyu have been bullied by Jin Man and co., and agrees to go there for the face-to-face talk. Later we see that Lee Kongjin is ready to go to school. His mother insists on him not taking risks and staying home to rest. She can call his teacher and tell him that. However, Lee Kongjin decides to go anyway, and so he goes to school to start a new life. He enters the grounds of Seokian High School located in Seoul. He looks around to see how life is for the high school kids and wonders if he can ignore everything and live the life of a high schooler going forward. Then we see Lee Mingyu welcoming Lee Kongjin to school. Kongjin says he first needs to learn on how to take care of Lee Mingyu first. Meanwhile, we see Doyoung, who is distressed and thinking of the past when he and Lee Kongjin were in the sauna bath together. Jo Doyoung, as always, was suggesting about how they should hire more young people to their gang and how that will be beneficial to the faction because the punishment for crime differs from kids to adults, and that after serving small punishments, the kids will be able to take care of the faction's future. Lee Kongjin is against it, stating that they should be the ones taking care of the business and that no kids should get involved in these kind of businesses. Jo Doyoung says that they themselves were very young when they got involved, to which Lee Kongjin says that he shouldn't have made the decision that day. This angers Jo Doyoung as he stands up inside the bath and says that if he hadn't taken the decision back then, orphans like him would have to suffer and they wouldn't be able to lead a luxurious life like they are now. Lee Kongjin jokes about Jo Doyoung getting up and exposing himself to lighten the mood. On the other hand, we see Lee Kongjin and Lee Mingyu going to meet up Jin Man and his crew to talk. After going there, the bullies make fun of Lee Kongjin, calling him the Iron Man of Seokian High. Jin Man says that he is surprised that Kongjin is alive. Kongjin says that he won't tell anyone about what happened that day, so he expects Jin Man to keep his side of the promise as well. Jin Man says that he is only letting Kongjin go because he is a patient. Lee Kongjin proceeds to leave, but Jin Man grabs a hold of Lee Mingyu and tells him that he can't go as he needs to work double the amount to pay up from Kongjin. He then says that kids like Mingyu who didn't have proper parenting don't have a choice to make, and this snaps something inside of Lee Kongjin. He uses Mingyu's head as leverage to jump up high and land a Superman-esque punch on Jin Man, which drops him and leaves him bloody. He then tells the surprised Mingyu to come with him as they're preparing to leave the scene, but Jin Man gets up and calls back Kongjin. Kongjin wonders why Gene Man got back up because he landed the punch perfectly. It's probably because his current body doesn't have the power of his original one. Gene Man rushes in with a punch. Lee Kongjin sidesteps and hits Gene Man with a tiny slap of sorts to taunt him. This angers Gene Man as he tries to hit Lee Kongjin with a straight cross right. Lee Kongjin ducks this time and hits Gene Man with a clubbing open hand strike, before once again blaming his current body to not be strong enough to translate his intentions into action. Lee Kongjin tries to finish off Gene Man with another hit, but Gene Man grabs a hold of his arm and tries to sling him forward to land a traditional judo slam. His fellow bullies are all excited to see Gene Man take the upper hand, but Lee Kongjin counters mid-slam, but delivering a thudding headbutt to the back of Gene Man's head, and while still being in the air, he delivers a side kick to the calf of Gene Man, sending him to his knees. Then Lee Kongjin grabs Gene Man by the hair and refers to everyone as kids and told them that this is what real street fight looks like. He then finds this remark to be stupid and rephrases by telling them to watch it as he slams down Gene Man's head face first into the ground before walking away. We then move back to the school, where we see Lee Kongjin attending a class where he thinks about whether he could have had a normal life like this if he had chosen to go to school instead of being a street thug when he was younger. Just as he is pondering about these things, we see Lee Mingyu staring right at Lee Kongjin, wondering just what went into the man for him to change this way. After the class ends, Lee Mingyu rushes towards Lee Kongjin's desk and tells him that they should quickly get out of here because they already know what happened to the last person who messed with Gene Man. Lee Kongjin asks, why should they run away, to which Lee Mingyu says that Gene Man's group is powerful and that they're waiting for them on the rooftop now that the class is over. He says that they should run away even though Lee Kongjin realizes that small factions like these exist too, but he says to Lee Mingyu that they should go to the rooftop to the shock of his friend. We then see Lee Kongjin going into a flashback to 2005, where we see a 26-year-old Lee Kongjin going up against the Pyeongtaek faction and taking them out. That day, Lee Kongjin and Jo Doyoung were walking that day, talking about having a dinner party for their kids, but it was then that the Pyeongtaek faction interfered and wanted to get into a fight with them. That is when they got into a fight with the Pyeongtaek and finished them off, with Lee Kongjin pulverizing the leader with his bare hands. Back to the present, Lee Kongjin says that he hadn't backed down then and he won't back down now. Lee Mingyu asks Lee Kongjin if he really wants to attack the Gene Man faction, to which Lee Kongjin says that he will attack Gene Man's faction first because they were going to attack him anyway. On the rooftop, we see Lee Kongjin and his crew sitting there with weapons in hand, waiting for their chance to take out Lee Kongjin, who humiliated Gene Man. Gene Man himself sits there with a sharp NT cutter to attack Kongjin. One of his faction mates tell him that he shouldn't go too far and attack Lee Kongjin with that cutter, as that will lead to him getting into a lot of trouble and get expelled from school. Gene Man tells his faction mate that he doesn't care about getting expelled from school and that he is willing to go out there and live in hard times if time were to call for it. The faction mate jokingly says that Gene Man is better than that. His joking tone pisses of Gene Man immensely, so he punches his lights out and emphasizes that he isn't speaking in a non-serious manner at the moment. Just at that moment, Lee Kongjin and Lee Mingyu arrive at the scene. This shocks the guys as they didn't expect their targets to come to them without them making any moves. Seeing them angers Gene Man, and Lee Kongjin says that all of them need to step up to fight him. This angers Gene Man beyond control, and he says that he will end Kongjin's life and that he doesn't care about the expulsion anymore. He orders his group to attack Lee Kongjin and Lee Mingyu. However, Lee Kongjin is more than ready as he charges at the oncoming attackers even quicker and takes out the first attacker in line with a Superman match. As he has his back turned, one of the lackeys try to attack him with a baseball bat from behind. Lee Kongjin notices this and ducks while spinning to hit his opponent with an uppercut to the midsection. Another opponent charges in to attack him with a weapon, but Lee Kongjin masterfully knocks him out with a spinning jumping hook kick. Another guy tries to attack him from his blind side with a baseball bat, but Lee Kongjin uses his forearms to smash the bat away before delivering a thunderous hook punch to the face. He then kicks another opponent around the knee to disable his ability to stand for the moment and send him down to the ground, crying out in pain. As everyone seems to be down, Gene Man charges in with his NT cutter to end Lee Kongjin's life. However, Lee Kongjin grabs a good hold of his before delivering a devastating barrage of punches to Gene Man. He then tells Gene Man that he shouldn't be doing this as kids who go to the juvenile correction center also end up going to prison, and half of them end up spending their lives in the prison, so he should be careful. He shouldn't look to end anyone's life when he still has the resources to eat bread. Gene Man still tries to move and resist by Lee Kongjin, then delivers a final knockout uppercut punch to Gene Man's jaw to take him out. Lee Kongjin then declares that while 3 years might be too long for them to handle him, but the Lee Kongjin from before is gone forever, and that he is the new version of him.